Naka-recording na ako, no? Pakitanggal mo to. Yung sa pula. Okay. Now, insofar as export is concerned, if import is subject to import clearance and formality, likewise, export shall be also subject to export clearance and formality. In other words, if import is subject to procedures, then export shall be also subject to procedures. Okay? Now, if import is subject to submission of documents, then export shall be also subject to submission of export documents. Now, insofar as import is concerned, we're talking about goods declaration. And the counterpart of goods declaration as to export is export declaration. Okay? All goods, okay, exported from the Philippines, whether subject to export duty or not, shall be also declared through a customs office po. A customs district po. Dadaan pa rin po ng Bureau of Customs. Whether it is subject to export duty or not, the export products or goods bound for export shall be coursed through or shall be passed through a customs district. And the word pass or course through means there would be a submission of the required export declaration plus documents po. And the submission or lodgement of export declaration shall be made, okay, shall be made by the person, okay, requesting for an export declaration approval. And the export declaration shall be lodged, okay, electronically or manually by the party or by the person making the declaration. So, if import has declarant, export also has declarant. So, import, we are the consignee. But if it is export, we are not the consignee. Instead, we are consignor or shipper or exporter. Meaning, if it is import, the goods shall be coming from foreign country. While if it is export, the goods shall be coming from the Philippines bound for foreign countries. Klaro ba yun? Now, in the goods declaration for import, there is a requirement regarding the description of the goods to be imported. And the description of the goods imported should be sufficient and is specific. Okay? And if import has three purposes for sufficient and specific description of the goods, likewise, export also has three purposes for sufficient and specific description. Okay? Specific description or information or description of the goods to be exported. There are three purposes. Alam niyo naman sa import. Number one, for proper valuation or appraisal, for proper classification, and for statistical purposes. Now, insofar as export, they are the same as the purpose. So, ganun din po. Pares lang po sila. The only difference is that yung isa po papasok dito sa Pilipinas, yung isa po palabas naman po. Klaro, Mr. Karandang? Klaro, Miss Luna? Yes, klaro po, no? Very basic po yan, Miss Manabat. Are you getting me?
Yes, sir.
So, three purposes, statistical, valuation, and classification po ang kailangan ideklara or to be contained in an export declaration po. Yun po ang laman. Okay, so alam niyo naman po siguro, no? What is description? And the description of the goods to be exported should not be in general. It should be specific. Just like the requirement in the description in the goods declaration of imported one. Specific po at sufficient po. Okay? Maliwanag po. Now, Miss Manabat, 501 please. Okay, class. Insofar as items which are imported into the Philippines, it is a requirement by some government agency that what we import from other country is subject or has met our rules and regulation to standards. Kung galing po ng ibang bansa, make sure or that country or the government of the exporting country abroad should make sure, okay, that before sending the goods into the Philippines, the goods has met the required standard required by the government of the exporting country. Now, insofar as export is concerned, Philippine export po, papunta po ng ibang bansa yung goods natin. If it is applicable, then the Bureau of Customs shall not allow the shipping of our Philippine export if our export products has not met, okay, the government standards. Remember, if you are an exporter, the exporter shall be allowed to ship the goods to other foreign countries if Section 501 has met the requirement. Meaning, before export products are allowed to be shipped from the Philippines into foreign country, that Philippine product should meet the so-called standards or grades. Okay? The standards or grades established by the Philippine government. Hindi pwede pong basta-basta na lang magpadala tayo sa ibang bansa. Now, what I would be asking you in this particular area, Mr. Karandang, Ms. Luna, and the other, okay, what is the purpose of requiring that our export products should meet the standard grades established by the government? Bakit nga ba? Bakit hindi na lang tayo magpadala kahit pipitsugang item? Mr. Karandang, Ms. Luna, bakit nga ba? Kailangan yung ipapadala natin for export are standard grades, hindi basta-basta. Yes, that's the answer. When I am the exporter of Philippine products, my product is not only representing or reflecting the name of the exporter here. It also represents our country. Kumbaga, di ba, Mr. Karandang, yung kasabihan na pagkagaling ng China, di ba? China lang yan, di ba? Ang sagwa, di ba? Tayo naman, pag nagpadala naman tayo sa ibang bansa, napag-usapan yung atin, ay, gawa ng Pilipinas yan, siguradong, alam mo na, di ba? Iba ang tingin, right? So that's the reason or that's the logic behind why our Philippine export, whenever or before being shipped abroad or shipped to foreign country, okay, that Philippine product should meet the standard or grades established by our government. Sino yan? The Department of Trade and Industry po. The Bureau of Product Standard under the Department of Trade and Industry po. It is them that test and evaluate whether our export products is with grades or with standard or has met the required standard. Kasi po, pag nagpadala po ang Pilipinas sa ibang bansa at hindi po standard or substandard, sino po ba ang masisira? It's not only the exporter, but also the name of our country. I hope you're getting me, no? Mr. Karandang, Miss Luna, Miss Manabat. So, hindi yung export products po natin, hindi lang po dala niya yung pangalan nun nag-export. Dala niya rin ang pangalan ng Pilipinas. Gusto nyo ba pagdating ng araw, pag mag-export kayo, walang bibili. Kasi pag nalaman nila, Pilipinas yan, walang standard yan. Di ba? Walang grade yan. Right, Mr. Karandang, Miss Luna, Miss Manabat, Miss De La Cruz, yan po yung purpose niyan. Now, aside from the standards or grade to be met by our export products established by our government, our export product should be properly packaged, should be properly labeled and marked in accordance with existing rules and regulation. So, if this is what we are going to export, sample lang po, no? Can you see my illustration? This is a whiteboard. If this one is going to be the subject of an export from the Philippines, this item should meet not only the standard and grades, kailangan to, pwedeng ilaban doon sa mga ibang produkto, sa ibang product na galing sa ibang bansa. And aside from that standard or grade established by the government, this item for export should be properly packaged, packed, and the package or immediate container should be properly labeled and marked where it has been produced or where it has been manufactured. Yun po ang requirement. Kung hindi man po nakalagay doon sa immediate container na to, mismong doon sa item kung saan po siya gawa or saan po siya produce. Yan po ang requirement. Now, if the exporter cannot meet number 1 po, standard or grades. Number 2 po, proper packaging, proper marking, or proper labeling. If an exporter cannot meet or cannot comply with any of those conditions or requirements, then the Bureau, okay, the Bureau of Customs can deny the granting of the approved export declaration. What does it mean? If goods are to be shipped in violation of the standard or grade rules, or if the goods are in violation of the labeling or marking requirement, then the Bureau of Customs has the right to reject and disapprove the export declaration. Now, what is the effect if the export declaration is disapproved? It cannot be shipped out from the Philippines. That's the effect. So, what's the moral lesson? The moral lesson here under Section 501 is an exporter is required to comply with the standard or grades requirement. Second, the goods to be exported should be properly packed, marked, and labeled. Absence of one, then there would be reason now, or there would be valid reason now for the Bureau of Customs to disapprove the export declaration. So, ang epekto niyan, hindi makakalis po yung goods or export natin from the Philippines because of what? Failure of the exporter to comply with the two requirements. Requirements as to standard of grades and requirements of marking and labeling where the goods have been produced or manufactured. Kailangan po may marka po siya. Yan po ang requirements. Failure, meaning failure to comply with any of these conditions or requirements, then the export declaration shall not be approved. Meaning, if it is disapproved, the exporter cannot ship it out. Yun lang po yan. Okay, next please. 502, Miss Luna. So, insofar as lodgement or filing of the export declaration, it is the Bureau who shall make the rules and regulation. Whether the rules and regulation is for electronic lodgement or manual filing, including the processing and the approval of the export declaration, the rules or the IRR is the authority and jurisdiction of the Bureau of Customs. How it shall be filed, how it shall be processed, how it shall be approved either manually or electronically, that is the business of the Bureau of Customs. Okay? So, para maintindihan ninyo, in lodgement electronically of export declaration, one of the requirements for exporter is that the exporter should be a CPRS. In other words, before an exporter may be allowed to lodge electronically export declaration, the importer should be a CPRS, registered. So, ibig sabihin po niyan, kailangan po bago ka makapag-lodge ng export declaration as exporter, the exporter should be holder of a CPRS, Client Profile Registration System. And that system is with the BOC. In other words, before an exporter can lodge electronically, number one requirement, the exporter should be a CPRS holder. It is registered as exporter with the BOC. Whether the lodgement is through electronic or whether it is to be filed manually, the export declaration, then the exporter should be a CPRS holder. Hindi ka pwedeng mag-lodge without this. And the processing of manual filing or processing and approval requires also that the exporter is also a CPRS holder. Now, insofar, pagka po CPRS ka, ito po yung exporter. Maglalodge din po siya ng goods declaration or ng export declaration with the value added service provider. So yan din po ang procedure. And this value added service provider can transmit the application for export declaration either to export division of the Bureau of Customs or through the so-called PIL export po. PIL Export Foundation. Yan po yan. Ibig sabihin po niyan, pagtanggap ng value-added service provider, the exporter can process the export declaration either through the ED or Export Division of the BOC or through the PIL Export Foundation. So, yan po yung procedure sa export. So, value-added CPRS, exporter, then value-added service provider, then ibabato sa ED or sa PIL Export Foundation. Yan po ang simple procedure ng export po natin. Maliwanag po? Maliwanag po. Guys, maliwanag? So, exporter lodges through the value-added service provider and it will be processed either by the export division of the BOC or it will be processed through the PIL Export Foundation. Yan po ang procedure. Okay? Whether export declaration shall be approved or disapproved, it depends now upon the export division or PIL Export Foundation. Okay, Section 503, Miss Bulaon. Okay, let continue. Continue. So, what is rules of origin? Rules of origin is a system or a tool which determine what is the composition of the goods and what or where or what is the country of origin of the goods in producing or manufacturing the goods. Now, what is the purpose of rules of origin? The purpose of the rules of origin is the issuance of a certificate of origin. Okay. So, meron po tayong tinatawag na AMS. Ano yung AMS, Mr. Karandang? Mr. Karandang, what does AMS stand for? ASEAN. Ayan po yun. ASEAN member states po. So, sino-sino po ang member ng ASEAN, Mr. Karandang? Yes, I know that. Sino pa po? Yes. Parang nanguhula ka, parang ano yun. 10 sila, right? Oh, ano ba yung sikreto dyan? These are the member. Nakikita, no? BIM, PST, ML, BC, right? So, yun po yung member. Yun po yung membership po. So, tingnan nyo to, ha? BIM. Okay, tatanggalin ko na po yung P. Okay, ST. Tapos po, ML, BC. Tama po? Okay. Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, okay, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. So, ito po yung Siam. Bakit hindi mo, sir, sinaba yung Pilipinas? Okay, ganito po yan. Now, if an importer buys goods, an importer from the Philippines po, kasi pag sinama ko pa yung PST dito, importer pa Pilipinas, mag-i-import ka sa Pilipinas. Hindi po. Ito po ang gagawin natin, no? If an importer purchases or buys goods from any of these ASEAN member states, and the exporter from any of these countries secures, okay, exporter po, ang exporter po nandito. Ang importer po nasa Philippines, right, Mr. Karandang? Nakikita nyo ba itong illustration ko? Okay. So, importer po nasa Pilipinas, ang exporter po galing po ng either or any of these countries or states po. Maliwanag? If the exporter can secure a certificate of origin from the government of the exporting country, let's say galing po ng Brunei, if the exporter can secure a certificate of origin issued by the Brunei government, then ano po epekto niyan? Ang epekto po niyan, CO shall be transmitted, o nakakuha po si exporter ng CO. Sino nag-issue? Either Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, or Cambodia. So, nakakuha si exporter. And before a certificate of origin is issued by any of these exporting or government of the exporting country, that government must see to it that the materials, the goods, have really been manufactured or produced in their country. Assuming yung exporter po was able to convince any of this exporting or government of the exporting country that the goods really originated from any of this country, mag-i-issue po ang government of the exporting country ng CO, Certificate of Origin. Kasi po, pumasa sa Rules of Origin. Okay? So, pag nag-issue po ng CO, either sino po dito sa kanila galing yung goods, let's say galing ng Singapore or Thailand, nag-issue po ang Thailand or Indonesia or Malaysia, that the goods really originated from them, nag-issue po ng Certificate of Origin, kanino po ibibigay, kanino po i-issue sa exporter po. Then the exporter now sends the original copy to the importer. Now, what's the effect of a Certificate of Origin? Since Philippine government is part of the ASEAN, the importation and exportation between countries or members of ASEAN shall be exempt from payment of customs duty po. Naintindihan ba, Mr. Karandang? So, si exporter po sa Malaysia. Okay, and Malaysian government issued a certificate of origin to the exporter. And the certificate of origin has been sent to the importer. Okay, so pagdating po ng goods, once the goods arrive into the Philippines, and the goods is now with the Bureau of Customs, the importer can avail of the exemption from duty if the importer can submit the original copy of the certificate of origin which was secured by the exporter, okay, from the government of the exporting country. So, pag meron pong CO, madalas po yan, it is free from, okay, CUD po. Libre po siya. Okay? Maliwanag po, guys? Maliwanag po. Okay. Babalik ko naman sa export naman. The goods came from the Philippines. At ang importer po is either located or in any of these countries po or ASEAN member states. So kung kanina po, ang kumuha po ng export or ng certificate of origin is the exporter from any of this country, this time po, it is the exporter who will secure now a copy of that CO from the Philippine government. Ano naman ang purpose po nun? Export products po, nakarating po kahit saan dito sa bansa na to, and the same export product is with CO issued by our government. O again po, pagdating po sa bansa nila, our export product shall not be also subject to import duty in any of these ASEAN member states. Ganun din po ang epekto niyan. Maliwanag ba, Mr. Garandang, Ms. Dizon, Ms. Luna, Mr. Almete? Okay, so klaro ha, ibig sabihin po, dito po kanina tayo nag-import. So, exporter po dito sa ibang bansa, ang kukuha ng certificate of origin. After securing the certificate of origin, it is the exporter who will be sending now the original copy of the CO to the importer and for purposes or for the importer to avail now of free customs duty. Ang babayaran na lang po ni importer pagdating po dito sa Pilipinas, and that goods is covered by a genuine certificate of origin, only the tax shall be paid. Libre po siya sa customs duty. Naliwanag po ba? Okay, kaya nakikita ninyo, pagdating po sa AHTN ninyo, anong dalawang klaseng rate ang makikita ninyo? Meron kayong makikitang ASEAN at saka yan, dalawa po ang rate. So pagka po non-member state of ASEAN or the goods came from a non-member state, or if the goods came from a country which has no free trade agreement or area with the Philippines, ang ginagamit po na rate is most favored nation. Okay? If the goods originated and came from a member state, okay, and there is a certificate of origin, ang gagamitin po is ASEAN. Tama po ba, Mr. Garandang? And what do you see or what rate you will usually see in ASEAN po? 0, 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20, or 30 po. Is it 0? Siguro hindi nyo tinitignan, ano? Kadalasan po, pag ASEAN po, 0 po ang duty. Ibig sabihin po, pag mayroong certificate of origin, wala pong babayaran yung importer na import duty. Maliwanag ba, Mr. Karandang? Maliwanag. If it is none or shipment is not covered by a certificate of origin because the goods came from a non-member ASEAN state, ang gagamitin po, hindi ASEAN, ang gagamitin po is most favored nation rate. Kaya dun po, may makikita kayo, 1%, 3%, 5%, 7%, 10%. These are what? Most favored nation rate. Ngayon, pag meron po CO, ang ginagamit po is what? 0 po. Wala pong babayarang customs duty. Okay? Now, Mr. Karandang, if you are an importer, Ms. Bulaon, if you're an importer, and goods are available, let's say, from Singapore, and the goods is also available in Germany. Same quality, same grade, same specification. Tingnan nyo to, ha? Goods that Mr. Karandang is planning to import is available in Singapore. And the goods that Mr. Karandang is planning to import is also available in Germany or from Germany. Now, Mr. Karandang, tinanong kita, where are you going to buy the goods? Yes, Malaysia, because as an importer, you can avail of the zero duty if the shipment is covered by a certificate of origin. Maliwanag po ba? O yan, yan po ang advantage that is one of the advantage of being a member of ASEAN. Marami po tayo, meron po tayong trade agreement na ASEAN and Australia and New Zealand. Meron po tayong ASEAN and India. Ibig sabihin nun, if you are an ASEAN member state at bumili ka from any of these countries covered by a certificate of origin, then yung importer po, libre po sa duty. Ano po yung mga other free trade area natin or free trade agreement natin? Meron po tayong ASEAN, okay, ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand, free trade area po. Meron po tayong ganon. Meron po tayong ASEAN, India. Meron din po tayong ASEAN, China. Meron din po tayong ASEAN, South Korea po. Okay, meron po tayong ASEAN, Japan. Meron po tayo. So, pagkagaling po ng Pilipinas, papunta ng Japan, okay, and there is certificate of origin, the importer there in Japan is not required to pay the import duty, only the tax. Pagkagaling naman po ng Japan at papunta ng Pilipinas, and the goods is covered by a certificate of origin issued by the Japanese government, then the importer shall not be allowed or shall not be required to pay the import duty. Libre po siya. Vice versa po, kung galing ng Pilipinas, papunta ng India, at meron pong certificate of origin, then the importer there in India would not be required to pay the import duty. Pagkagaling naman po ng India, papunta ng Pilipinas yung goods, and the goods is covered by a certificate of origin that the goods really originated from India, okay, again, the importer would not be required to pay the import duty. Yan po ang benefits ng isang member ng ASEAN. Did you get it? So, tandaan ninyo yan. Para mamaya, pagdating ng araw, matanong kayo, what is the benefit of buying goods from a member state of ASEAN, and why not buy it from a non-member state? So, pagka binili po yan from member state of ASEAN and the government of the exporting country issued the certificate of origin, then the importer shall be entitled to zero rate of duty, meaning no customs duty shall be assessed by the BOC because of the certificate of origin. So, pwede kayong tanungin ngayon. Now, question. Okay? There are several persons or agencies of the government who can issue the certificate of origin. One, of course, the Bureau of Customs. When the Bureau of Customs issues a certificate of origin for our export, the BOC certifies that the goods originated or really a production or manufacture of the Philippines. That's the Bureau of Customs. So, pag sila po nag-issue, ibig sabihin po, the BOC is certifying that the export products really a product of the Philippines. Another government agency is the Board of Investment po. Pwede rin po sila mag-issue that the goods are of Philippine origin, specifically when the exporter of goods is registered with the Board of Investment. Pwede rin po ang BOI or Board of Investment Specifically, if the products to be exported is a product or manufactured by a company registered with the BOI. Another government agency that may also issue a certificate of origin is the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, specifically if the goods are product or manufactured by an exporter registered with the Philippine Economic Zone Authority. Another who can issue a certificate of origin is not a government agency, this time a private company. The exporter, ang sinasabi ko po, ibig sabihin po niyan, 3 government agencies can issue certificate of origin. Okay? Maliwanag po, Mr. Karandang, Ms. Kangquin, Ms. Lison? Tatlo po silang government agency. One is the Bureau of Customs, second is the Board of Investment, and third is the Philippine Economic Zone Authority. So pag rehistrado ka po as exporter with the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, the certificate of origin may be issued by the PESA. If the exporter is registered with the Board of Investment, then the certificate of origin may also be issued by the Board of Investment. Kung hindi naman po sa PESA or hindi naman po sa BOI registered exporter, then the Bureau of Customs can issue the certificate of origin po. The third or the fourth that can issue is not a government agency. It is the exporter himself that can issue a certificate of origin. And this certificate of origin is called what? Self-certification po. Ibig sabihin po niyan, if Ms. Manabat is an exporter, okay, Ms. Manabat can also issue a certificate of origin provided that Ms. Manabat is accredited by the Bureau. Ibig sabihin po niyan, pwedeng si Ms. Manabat hindi po siya accredited with the BOC as exporter, and Ms. Manabat wants to secure a certificate of origin, hindi po siya ang mag-i-issue. Ang mag-i-issue po is the Bureau of Customs. But if Manabat is a registered exporter, then, okay, that Ms. Manabat can also issue a self-certification as to the origin of the goods, provided that Ms. Manabat is accredited or registered by the BOC po. So, tatlo po, government agency. Yung isa naman po is self-certification system as to the issuance of certificate of origin. Sino po ang mag-i-issue? It is not the BOC, the BOI, or the PESA, but this time, it is to be issued through a self-certification by the exporter po, provided that the exporter is registered or accredited with the Bureau of Customs po. So, those are what? Those are the requirements or those are the provisions under 500, 501, 502, and 504 regarding the export clearance and formalities po. Tandaan niyo po itong CO. Pag may CO po, the importer can avail of zero rate of duty. Wala pong babayaran. Pagdating po sa ibang bansa, nag-export din po tayo, ganun din po. Maliwanag po, guys? Maliwanag po, guys. Okay, Miss Gamotea. Okay, so we will now be moving on to another procedure. Okay, this is customs transit po. And it is under section 600 po. Okay, customs transit in the customs territory. What does it mean? A transit is defined under Section 102 po. Mr. Karandang, can you define to me or can you read the definition of customs transit or transit under Section 102? Yes, go ahead, please. Okay. So, a transit means or refers to a customs procedure whereby goods are transported under customs supervision and control from one customs office to another customs office. From Port of Manila to Clark Customs, pwede po yan. Okay? Okay? From Port of Manila to Clark Development Corporation or PESA zone, it is allowed po. Kaya po nakalagay dyan, under customs control and supervision, goods are transported from one customs office to another customs office or from one customs office to a free zone. Tama po ba, Mr. Karandang? Mr. Karandang. So, yan po ang transit po. Now, from one customs office to a CBW po, that is also transit po. So, tandaan ninyo, ang transit po, it's either from one customs district to another district po. Let's say, from Port of Manila to Port of Subic, that is transit po. From one customs office to free zone, pwede po yan. Transit pa rin po yan. Now, from customs office to a CBW, then that is also transit. Okay? Now, under Section 600, it provides for, okay, who or what shipment may be the subject of customs transit. And under Section 600, what are those shipments that cannot be the subject of transit? Now, if the goods are destined to Manila or Port of Manila, kung nakalagay po sa Port of Unloading is Manila, but it says in the bill of lading also that the final destination of the goods destined for Port of Manila is Port of Subic, it will, or the BOC Port of Manila will allow the transfer or movement of the goods from Port of Manila to Subic. Kasi nakalagay po dun sa bill of lading na Port of Unloading is Port of Manila, however, the goods is finally or it is to be destined finally to Port of Subic. Papayagan po bang makalabas po ng Port of Manila? The answer is yes, because it says there that the unloading is Port of Manila, however, its final destination is Port of Subic. So, from Port of Manila, it will be transported to Port of Subic. Maliwanag po ba? But if there is no final destination indicated in the bill of lading, let's say, nakalagay doon, Port of Unloading, Port of Discharge, is Port of Manila, and the goods is subject to consumption entry, then, transit shall not be allowed. Ibig sabihin po dyan, wala naman po kasi nakalagay na papunta pala talaga ng Subic ito. Port of Manila ka lang. So, from there, or in the Port of Manila, the importer shall be required to file the consumption entry and, of course, to pay the duties and taxes po. Now, if the goods or the bill of lading says that the final destination of the goods is Port of Subic, but the Port of Discharge or Unloading is Port of Manila, then the POC Port of Manila can allow the transfer of goods to Port of Subic. Pag nakarating po yung goods from Port of Manila to Port of Subic, okay, and it says, or the importer files the consumption entry not in the Port of Manila, but in the port or at the Port of Subic, then the payment of duties and taxes shall not be made in Port of Manila, but in Port of Subic. Kasi po, yun po ang final destination niya. Okay? Maliwanag po. Maliwanag po. As a general rule, transit shall be allowed. However, when goods are destined for consumption, then, pag sinabi po sa Port of Manila lang siya, destined for consumption, hindi na po pupunta sa iba, then, the BOC will not allow transfer. Okay? Bayad ka ng duties and taxes at the port or in the Port of Manila. But if the bill of lading says the final destination of Port of Port of Subic, then the BOC Port of Manila can allow the transfer of goods from Port of Manila to Port of Subic. At kung doon po ang final destination and the consumption entry is to be filed at the Port of Subic, then Port of Subic is the customs office wherein the duties, taxes, and other charges are to be paid po. Okay? Letter A po, Miss Gamotea. Okay, so therefore, how many port of entry do we have? Okay, sabi ko nga po sa inyo, port of entry is a domestic port which is open to both foreign and domestic trade. Meron po tayo sa Bisaya, meron tayo sa Manila, meron po tayo sa Luzon. Tatlo po yung lumalabas na port of entry natin, either in Bisaya, in Manila, or in Luzon po. So therefore, under letter A, if the goods are subject of an outright exportation, means pagdating dito sa Port of Manila, and Port of Manila is a port of entry, it can be transported. Okay, so ibig sabihin yan, nag-import ka, dumating dito sa Port of Manila, and according to the bill of lading, the goods that has arrived in Port of Manila, and Port of Manila is part of a port of entry, that goods can be transported from Port of Manila to any port in Luzon or in Bisaya po. Pwedeng ipadala po from Port of Manila as goods subject of an outright exportation from Manila to any of the port located in Luzon or to any of the port located in Bisaya. Ganun po yan. So, from port of entry to another port of entry as exit point. So, ibig sabihin po niyan, dumating yung goods imported, hindi na po ibinaba sa Port of Manila, pero diretso po kagad yung barko papunta ng either Luzon or Bisaya po. And Luzon or Bisaya po, o yung entry point po is Manila, a port of entry. But the exit point as outright exportation is either Bisaya or Luzon po. Pwede po yan. Ang gagamitin po dyan is also a customs transit po. Klaro guys? Klaro po? Letter B, Mr. Almuete. Okay. So, itong from port of entry to another port of entry, wag po natin yan kasi it's the same as, ito po, from port of entry to another port of entry. So, hindi po siya, ang pagkakaiba po ng letter A, the goods that has been imported is subject of an outright exportation. Ipapalabas din po, ilalabas din po. Ito naman po, from port of entry to another port of entry, let's say, galing ng Bisaya, pwede bang dalhin papunta ng Maynila? Yes po. Maliwanag po ba? Hindi po siya outright exportation or the goods that has been unloaded at the port of Bisaya or any port of entry of Bisaya may be also the subject of transit from port of entry of Bisaya to port of Manila as port of entry. Or pwede bang ipadala sa Central Luzon? Sa Luzon po? Yes po. Kasi po nakalagay dyan is from one port of entry to another port of entry, but the goods are not for exportation. Sabihin, dadalhin galing ng Bisaya po, galing sa ibang bansa, binaba sa sa Bisaya, pwedeng dalhin pa rin sa Port of Subic or sa Port of Manila po. Pwede po yan. Or from one port of entry to another inland customs office. O, ibig sabihin po niyan, from, let's say, galing po ng Bisaya yung goods, ibinaba doon, pwede pong dalhin sa isang customs district po. Pwedeng dalhin sa NAIA Customs Office, pwedeng dalhin sa Clark Customs Office po. Yan po yung sinasabi sa letter B po. Next please, letter C po. Mr. Karandang, paki-letter C nga. So ito naman po, galing po ng NAIA as Inland Customs Office, papunta naman po ng Port of Entry. Let's say, ang Port of Entry po is Bisaya. Pwede po ba yan? Yes po. Kasi po yung Port of Entry Bisaya, tingnan nyo, ano? Yung goods po, galing po ng NAIA, pwede pong dalhin yan ng Bisaya or Port of Entry in Bisaya as an exit point for outright exportation. So, yung kargamento po, galing po ng NAIA, okay, pwede pong dalhin sa Bisaya po. Yes po, pwede po yan. Ang sabi po dyan, from one inland customs office to a port of entry. O port, let's say kung Bisaya po is a port of entry, meron din pong airport doon, pwede pong ipadala doon. Okay, so ang baligtad po ito. Ito po kanina, yung letter B po, from one port of entry to an inland customs office. Ito naman pong letter C, from inland customs office to a port of entry po. Baligtad po yan. Okay? Maliwanag po. Now, in letter A and letter C, okay, the exit point in letter A is another port of entry. While in letter C, a port of entry is also the exit point for outright exportation. Ang pagkakaiba po ng letter A and letter C is from port of entry to another port of entry. While in letter C, it is an inland customs office. Opisina na po ng customs papunta po sa port of entry as an exit point of the outright exportation. Okay? So, therefore, from Bisaya to Luzon, o letter A po siya. From customs, Subic, to, let's say, Bisaya, o letter C po siya. Kasi po, customs office po is customs Subic po. Customs inland office po. Letter D po. Ms. Gamotea. O yan, inulit lang po, no? Letter D po, from one port of entry to another port of entry. Susunod naman po yung pagkakaiba. From one inland customs office to another inland customs office. Let's say, from customs clerk to Port of Subic or customs Subic. Pwede po ba yon? Yes po. Kasi Clark Customs is an inland customs office. While Port of or Customs Subic is another inland office. So the transfer of goods or the transit of goods may be from one port of entry to another port of entry or from one inland customs office to another inland customs office. O sabihin, customs clerk to customs Subic. Allowed po ba yan? Yes po. Kaya po ang definition natin ng transit is, a transit is a procedure whereby goods are transported under the supervision of the Bureau of Customs from one customs office to another customs office or from one customs district to another customs district or from one customs office to a free zone or from one customs office to a CBW po. Yan po, ang tawag po dun sa movement na yon is called transit po. Next paragraph, Mr. Karandang. Okay, so ulitin ko po, para po magkaintindihan tayo. Before transit of goods, either from one port of entry to another port of entry, from port of entry to a customs office or inland customs office, there must be an approved TSAD po. Yan po yun. Ibig sabihin po dyan, before the Bureau of Customs allows the movement or transfer of goods from one port of entry to another port of entry or from port of entry to an inland customs office, the goods to be transported or transferred should be covered by an approved TSAD. And TSAD stands for Transit Single Administrative Document. Maliwanag po ba? Maliwanag po. If the importer has secured a TSAD, meaning the importer can move the goods from one customs office to another customs office because he or the importer has a permit to do the transfer. Kasi po, wala pong babayarang duties and taxes yan. Let's say from NAIA to Clark Customs. So, yan. Maliwanag po. Movement or removal of goods is from NAIA, then delivery is Clark Customs. Before the goods may be withdrawn and removed from NAIA, there must be a corresponding approved permit to transfer it. And that permit that the law is referring to is the so-called TSAD po. Okay? However, transfer of goods in customs transit from one means of transport to another shall be allowed. O, ano po yun? From aircraft to aircraft. Yes po, pwede po yan. So, NAIA to Clark, aeroplano po. So, dumating po dito yung aeroplano. Okay? Ito po yung aeroplano. Tapos, meron pong another airplane that will be going to Clark. Pwede po yan. So, nakalagay po dyan, however, transfer of goods from one means of transport to another shall be allowed. Okay? Maliwanag po ba? O, ibig sabihin po niyan, ito po yung aircraft A ang nagdala po sa NAIA. Tapos, ito pong aircraft B ang magdadala naman sa Clark. That is allowed from one means of transport to another means of transport. That is allowed. Transit po. Okay? Provided that there is also a TSAD. And the removal of goods, let's say kung ito po yung goods, it should be properly sealed po. Ayan. Ibig sabihin po niyan, nakaselyo po yan, and the one who will make the seal is not the importer nor the airline company, but it shall be sealed by what? The BOC po. To make sure po that during transfer or transport, okay, what is contained remains to be intact. Na pagdating po dito, is kung ano po yung nakalagay nung nasa loob, hindi po napalitan or hindi po nagalaw. Kaya po meron po siyang tinatawag na seal or fastening device. Kasi po, wala pong binayaran duties and taxes yan. What if during transfer from one aircraft to another aircraft, nasira po yung seal or yung fastening device at dito po sa Clark Customs nagkaroon, na-discover that there was, ikaw Mr. Karandang or Miss Gutierrez, galing po dito sa NAIA Customs, lumipat po from one aircraft to another aircraft, dinala dito sa Clark Customs. Now, ito po yung package na yan. Dito po, nakaselyo. Pagdating po dito, sira po yung selyo. Mr. Karandang and Miss Gutierrez, what would you suspect? Kung ikaw ang taga Clark Customs. Sira po yung selyo. Ano? Na open, if there was an opening or there is a breaking or the seal is broken, then you would suspect, if you were the customs assigned at Clark and you are the one who will be receiving the goods or the package subject of a transfer, you would suspect that it has been opened. Then after it was opened, Ms. Gutierrez or Ms. Manabat, ano po ang nangyari? O sagot, wala man lang sasagot sa akin. Miss Bulaon, let's say, ito po, sarado siya, close. Pagdating po dito, the seal has been broken. The fastening device has been opened or has been broken. If you were the Bureau of Customs clerk, Miss Bulaon, what would you suspect? Yes? Ano po? Nagpuslit. Ikaw, Mr. Karandang. Miss Luna, what would you suspect kung ikaw po yung customs dito, natatanggap po? Open na po yung seal, sira na po yung seal. Ano po? Bakit po? Ay, peka muna, medyo mahina, medyo choppy yung ano nyo. Mr. Karandang, ikaw yon. O, Mr. Almete, ikaw yung customs dito sa Clark. And dinala sa'yo, the seal is broken. What would you suspect? Sabi ni Miss Gutierrez, the package has been opened. Now, Mr. Almete, bakit kaya binuksan? Miss Gamotea, anong tingin mo kung ikaw po yung ikaw yung customs dito natatanggap po? Mr. Karandang, what would you suspect if may anomaly? Ano nga po yung anomaly? May theft. Oh, ito po ay hindi po. Ang nangyari po dyan, seal is broken, there was tampering or replacement or substitution of the contents. Napalitan po yung laman. Tama po ba? So, kung dito po, galing po dito, okay, tela, textile, pagdating po dito, rugs na lang po ang laman. Para po din yan sa warehousing, napalitan po ang laman. Ito po tela, pagdating dito, because the seal is broken, then, normally the Bureau of Customs would suspect that during transit, the contents of the package, which was properly sealed, and when the package arrived at Clark, then, the package seal has been broken. Normally, the BOC would suspect that there was substitution or replacement as to the original contents po. Yan po ang epekto. Okay, next please. The party, Miss Gamotea. Okay, sandali lang po, ako muna po. Now, the party responsible for transit of goods, sino-sino po yan? Okay? One, the one applying for a transit is the importer or declarant po. And who shall approve the transfer or transit? Of course, kung galing po dito sa NAIA, okay, the DC of NAIA. And who shall receive it? The DC of what? Customs clerk. So therefore, these are the person who shall be responsible in complying with the rules and regulation regarding movement of goods from one customs office to another customs office po. Okay. So, DC, NAIA, shall approve the TISAD, and the goods are to be transported from here to here. And it is the DC now who shall see to it that the goods are placed in a sealed or intact status. Hindi nagalaw. So, sino mag-check nun? The DC of the Customs Clerk po. Siya po ang mag-check nun. Okay? In other words, kung sabi ni DC, Mr. DC NAIA informs the DC Clerk Customs, may papunta po diyang transit goods. And it will be arriving to you today, mag-aabang po siya. Okay? And normally po, when the transit is land transit, kung isasakay po sa isang truck, hindi po sa eroplano, okay, trucking, common carrier, normally po, there is a customs guard that will accompany the movement of goods from here to here. Customs guard po yon. Ang tawag po doon is continuous underguarding. And the purpose of continuous underguarding by the customs guard is to see to it that the goods shall be removed from this point and to be delivered to this point, Clark Customs, without delay. And there would be no breaking of the seal or fastening device placed by the BOC. Kaya po, dito, ang hawak po niya, normally, anong hawak niya, Mr. Karandang? Ipare-receive, siba, kasama siya sa magta-transfer, tama ba, yung customs guard. Sasakay siya sa truck, galing dito, dadali niya dito. Ano po yung dala niya? Anong tawag mo dyan? What is this, Mr. Karandang? Transfer note po. So, may dala po si Customs Guard na transfer note. Kasama po siya doon sa truck. Tapos, yung transfer note po, ipare-receive niya dito sa responsible employee under the District Collector of Customs acknowledging that the package is now with the Customs District of Clerk po. So, ngayon, pagbalik ni CG, dala niya na ngayon yung sign TN at dadalhin niya ngayon kay DC. Sir, District Collector of Customs, nandun na po yung kargamento. What is your evidence? Here is my transfer note, signed and acknowledged by District Collector of Customs of Clark po. Maliwanag po ba? Failure to comply with the above or the aforementioned obligation or likewise failure to follow as prescribed itinerary, ibig sabihin po niyan, pag sinabi mong ililipat mo from NAIA, you cannot bring it to any other place except Clark Customs po. Bawal po yon. Ang tawag po doon is when goods are withdrawn from here for transfer or transit to Customs Clark and it was brought to another place. Ang tawag po dyan is diversion. Sa warehousing po natin yan, anong tawag mo doon? Mr. Karandang? How do you call that violation? Winidro mo dito, instead na dali mo sa Clark Customs, kung saan mo dinala, anong tawag mo doon? Unauthorized withdrawal po, Mr. Karandang. Bawal po yon. Now, with respect to period of delivery, the person transporting it and accompanying it must see to it, pag sinabi ni DC na kay DC Customs Clerk, darating sa iyo ngayong araw yan, the goods must arrive today. So therefore, dalawa po ang requirement po dyan. Okay? The prescribed delivery place or itinerary should be complied with. And one. That's one. And another requirement is the delivery period. Pag sinabi ni DC, in-inform niya si DC dito, darating po yan sa inyo, ganitong araw at ganitong oras. It must be properly complied with. Now, if the goods did not if the goods was not delivered here, magkakaroon po ng problema. Ang tawag po nga natin yan sa warehousing po is unauthorized withdrawal. Ayan, what is the effect? If goods are delivered not here but in some other area, then the goods shall be seized and the importer who requested the transfer from here to here or from here to there shall be required to pay the duties, taxes, including fines, penalties, and surcharges for delivering the goods to another place other than the destination po. So, babayad ka na ng duties and taxes plus fines, penalties, and applicable surcharge po. Kasi po, hindi ka sumunod doon sa kondisyones na doon mo lang siya dadalhin. So, that would be the effect. Now, if there would be a delay in the delivery, let's say po, ang sabi ni District Collector, darating siya yan, DC, Clark Customs ngayong araw, but it was not delivered today, so the importer has to make the necessary justification why there was a delay po. Without justification, what happened or what caused the delay? Again, the duties and taxes shall be paid by the importer, plus of course, fines, surcharges, and penalties applicable po. So, guys, as a future customs broker, hindi po si importer ang mag-transfer. Kayo po ang mag-a-apply ng transfer po. Kaya po as future customs broker, kayo po ang kumuha ng TSAD or approved TSAD, it is your responsibility also. Maliwanag po ba? So be careful. Kaya po pagka kumuha po kayo ng tracking na magdadala from this point to that point, make sure na yung tracking na kukunin ninyo ay siguradong dadalhin doon sa destination po. Klaro guys? Klaro po? Klaro. Okay. So, pagka po hindi naidala doon sa dapat puntahan, the duties and taxes, other charges becomes payable plus fines, penalties, and surcharges. Pag na-delay po ang transfer po and the delay is not justified, okay, again, the duties, taxes, and other charges shall be payable plus, of course, the imposition and collection of fines and penalties and surcharge applicable po. Ipe-penalize po si importer. Kaya po as future customs broker, kayo po inaatasan, you were the one authorized by the importer to do the processing of the TSAD or the transit permit, then you have to follow the itinerary, the place of delivery, and the time of delivery. Kasi po, pag sa iba po napunta yung kargamento, ikaw po kagad ang hahanapin ng Bureau of Customs because you as the customs broker represented the importer with the Bureau. At isa pa, kayo po ang kukuha ng tracking as future customs broker. Okay? Kaya po, when there is approved TSAD, you have to follow the condition in the TSAD to deliver it to the specific or the destination as applied in the transfer and deliver the goods within the time as indicated in the TSAD po. Hindi po pwedeng, sa susunod na linggo, hindi po. Kailangan po pag-withdraw mo, dalhin mo kagad doon. Maliwanag, Mr. Karandang? Okay, what time is it? Is it already 2:30? 2:43. Overtime na ako. Nakakaya naman sa inyo. Okay, guys. The remaining section, I will be lecturing it to you tomorrow. Tatapusin ko na po so that we can proceed now to goods declaration and consumption entry and TSAD, warehousing entry, and export declaration. Ipakikita ko po sa inyo mga itsura ng mga yan. And I will ask you to accomplish and fill out a SAD or goods declaration para po kasama, para matutunan nyo rin po. Maliwanag, guys? Is there any question so far? Gamoteya, may tanong, Miss Bulaon, Miss Gutierrez, Miss Aralmete, Miss Due, Manabat, Luna, and Kangkin. Meron po ba kayong question? Okay, very good po. Again, guys, good day, and you are dismissed po.